Well, good Monday evening. Happy Labor Day. I'm Meteorologist Evan Stewart here at WVEC Television in Norfolk, Virginia. 13 News Now. For those of you who are just finding us here on some of our social channels, this is our weekly or weeknight and every day of the week series here called Hurricane Hub Live, where we talk about what's going on in the tropics, typically focusing on the Atlantic since we are an Eastern Seaboard television station. It's really the Gulf and the Eastern Seaboard that is impacted the most by tropical systems, although we do have one potential system in the Pacific that could bring some rain to the southwest. If that system develops, and even if it doesn't, I think it'll bring some wet weather to that part of the country. We've got a tropical depression that's likely to form later this week in the Atlantic. We've got Tropical Storm Kiko also in the Pacific, so that's a different system than the one I was mentioning a little bit earlier that is forecast to strengthen into a hurricane. And a little bit later on, we'll look back at 2019 and Hurricane Dorian, a massive hurricane that created quite a bit of damage across parts of the Caribbean. So let's get right to it. This is sort of a more informal, a little more casual presentation here on Hurricane Hub Live, where we talk about what's going on in the Atlantic. And there are a lot more clouds than what we were seeing last week, certainly. A little cluster of thunderstorms down here in the southern Caribbean, not expected to develop in anything. We are watching. There's the potential. Now, the Hurricane Center isn't really talking about it just yet. It's not highlighted, but there's the potential that an area of low pressure along a stalled front could try to do something here close to the Bahamas. We'll have to watch that area, but the main area that we're watching is what we were talking about last week or over the weekend. If you were watching Hurricane Hub Live, I was doing it last week. Hunter was on over the weekend, and we were talking about this tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa on Sunday, and it has done that now. And that's where this X is, right here, south of the Cabo Verde Islands. And we were saying once it got out here towards the Cabo Verde Islands or a little bit farther to the west, that there was some potential for development. Still seeing that. Next 2 days, 10% chance of development, just not really an area that's favorable. Once we get beyond those 2 days, so by mid and late week, those odds go up to 60%. As a matter of fact, we're looking at the likelihood that we'll have a tropical depression somewhere down here in the tropical Atlantic by the middle and the end of this week. It's not very well organized right now. We don't have a well-defined center of circulation. And this is one of those instances where we have to have something developed for the models to track. Now, the models do a good job of predicting when something will develop, but it's not really until we get something that's developing that we can really make some of those more long-range forecasts. And the models are still flip-flopping back and forth quite a bit. If it's a stronger system, likely curve off into the North Atlantic. If it's a weaker system, it might move towards the Caribbean. So here's what the American model is showing. Today, nothing, as we would expect. As we go through the week, though, we start to see a little bit of some deepening and a little bit of a strengthening of an area of low pressure. So this is by Friday. This is when we're likely looking at a tropical depression. So this is 4 days from now. And notice it's still well out there, well away from the United States, from the Lesser Antilles, from South America, still close, closer to the Cabo Verde Islands and the African coastline, even by Friday. So any kind of development or any potential impacts, and I'm not saying there will be, but even if any potential impacts would be a long ways away for the eastern half of the United States, if it even comes towards the eastern United States. So that's Friday. Let's go here through the weekend. This is, of course, the weekend coming up, and get into Monday. So this is a week from now, Monday, September 8th. You can see there the top corner of the screen. Still out there in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the American model does call for a little bit more strengthening. Some of the other models, like the Google AI model, has it a little bit weaker. And a weaker system tends and trends to go down towards the Caribbean. That's just the nature of how the low-level winds and the upper-level winds influence tropical systems. A stronger storm is bigger, it's taller, so it's more influenced by some more of the mid and upper-level winds, whereas if it's a weaker system, the thunderstorms aren't as tall, it's not as influenced as much by the mid-level winds, but the low-level winds, which are generally, here from east to west going into the Caribbean. So a little bit of a stronger storm, got the big ridge of high pressure, typically located over the Atlantic. Sometimes it's a little closer to the East Coast. That Bermuda high, sometimes it's a little farther east, and that would curve it a little bit more towards the north. And you can sort of see that turn here as we get into Thursday of next week. So this is a week and a half away. American model calls for it to strengthen. Here's Bermuda, so still, again, a long ways away. This is 10 days from now, and it's still out there in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, if it even forms. So again, a lot of time to watch that system. Could go towards the Caribbean, could curve off into the Atlantic, a long ways off. But it's something we're certainly going to mention, and we'll likely have a tropical depression later this week, probably Thursday or Friday. So that's what's going on in the Atlantic. Pacific continues to be active. We have Tropical Storm Kiko. And this was that other system I was talking about down here, just off the coast of Mexico, Tropical Invest 94E. So the E means Eastern Pacific. If it was an L, it would be the Atlantic. And it's here just off the coast of Mexico, likely to become a tropical system here in the next day or so. You can see those odds up to 90% right now. Currently, moving to the west-northwest at 15, winds of 30 miles per hour. So we'll put on those computer models because we don't start getting these spaghetti models until we have an invest. So we don't have spaghetti models on what hasn't even formed out in the Atlantic. That system way out there off the coast of Africa. But since we do have an area of investigation, we can run the models on it. And you can see quite a few bring it up towards the Baja Peninsula. Likely as a tropical system. Some carry it off towards the west. I think the vast majority of the models that are a little more reliable carry it here across western Mexico, and then potentially some of that moisture moving up here into the southwest United States. Certainly as a weakened system, but some much needed rain for the southwest because they're dealing with drought situations. So that's what's going on here in the eastern Pacific with that area of investigation. Again, pretty good chance that we will have another named storm here within the next day or two. We also have Kiko, which is right in here. Kiko currently located over 1,200 miles west-southwest of the southern tip of Baja California. Winds of 65 miles per hour. It has strengthened, and it is forecast to continue to strengthen as it moves to the west-southwest at 7 miles per hour. And again, this is way out there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. As a matter of fact, take you out Saturday, here's Hawaii way out here. So potential here right now is that Kiko is going to strengthen into a hurricane, from a Category 2 hurricane with winds of 110 miles per hour. This is Saturday. Where it goes beyond there, still a lot of questions. We start to see a little more of that curve off towards the north. Could be a little bit farther to the south. But a lot of times these systems start to weaken as they get closer to the Hawaiian Islands. So that's Kiko that's out there in the Pacific. So something else to watch in the Pacific, since the Atlantic, for the most part, has been fairly quiet this hurricane season. Of all of the named storms, only one, of course, Aaron, became a hurricane. It was a Category 5 hurricane, a major hurricane, but so far, everything else in the Atlantic has been a tropical storm, and by the end of the week, we might have something to talk about into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, coming up, we're going to take a look back to 2019 and Hurricane Dorian. Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. On this day, just 6 years ago, Hurricane Dorian reached Category 5 intensity, making landfall in the Bahamas. Sustained winds were 185 miles per hour. It's the strongest known tropical system to impact the Bahamas. Now, Dorian stalled out in the Bahamas, then days later started to move slowly toward the north-northwest. September 6th is when Dorian weakened into a Category 1 hurricane, but intensity picked up speed and it turned towards the northeast along the North Carolina coast.
This is a message from Dare County Emergency Management. The time to safely evacuate has passed, and Emergency Management is advising those in Dare County to shelter.
As you heard that was from Dare County. Hurricane Dorian's passage over Dare County, North Carolina, resulted in an estimated $15 million in damage. According to the National Weather Service, the most severe storm surge occurred on Ocracoke Island, where several people were trapped in their attics by flooding from the 4 to 5 foot storm surge. Now, people were airlifted off the island to shelters on the mainland. North Carolina Highway 12 along Ocracoke Island suffered damage from flooding, as you can see here. And more than 190,000 homes in North Carolina lost power during the storm. Let's toss it to former 13 News Now reporter Stephen Graves with a look back at the storm coverage in 2019.
Tell our family that we're okay, we're going in the attic, and we will be in touch as soon as we can.
With winds howling and floodwaters rising outside her home on Ocracoke Island, Susie Fitch Slater and her husband stand in shock. Hurricane Dorian on the tail end of releasing its wrath.
All this has happened in just a few minutes. It's coming into the house.
You can see the furniture sitting in deep water.
I pray that everybody is safe.
Her son Tim prayed as well. Having no way to get to his mom from Hatteras Island, he finally got an update.
Got her on some jet skis and took her to her friend's house. She's up real high. So they're going to be taken care of.
This all happened as Tim and his family braced for Dorian themselves. They shared these pictures of whiteout conditions and flooded roads in Rodanthe. He snapped this picture of the sound side of the island seemingly dried up. Later, the water flows back in.
Tomorrow, after the storm passes over from us, we're going to go down there and try to bring some supplies and stuff like that.
And as the waters receded on Ocracoke Island, Dorian's true destruction shows.
It's been a traumatic day. There were people on the rooftops, people swimming, and we are Ocracoke strong, and we are strong in the Lord.
Stephen Graves, 13 News Now.
And of course, some of those same areas were hard hit just a couple of weeks ago by Aaron, which passed well offshore. Here in Norfolk, Hurricane Dorian beat down on the usual trouble spots that are prone to flooding. Little Creek began to come out of its banks in Ocean View, Pleasant Avenue, Hampton Boulevard and Larchmont, and roadways just past Magnolia Avenue on the way to the Naval Station Norfolk were underwater. Let's take a look back.
This is life at sea level. Hurricane Dorian beat down on Hampton roads, and the usual trouble spots in Norfolk started to flood.
It's flooded like this, I guarantee high tide ain't hit until like 3 or 4 o'clock, so it's going to be definitely higher.
In Ocean View, it started along Pleasant Avenue. Eric Mack has lived here for 10 years, and he's seen it all.
So what's the worst you can remember in terms of flooding?
I lived on 9th Bay, and I stayed in an apartment complex, and I had 6 steps that went up to my apartment complex, and it was almost coming into the door, and that was on a northeastern.
So not the worst he's seen, but still the water rose enough to capture cars, flood yards, and block streets. And it's the same story in Colonial Place. But the floodwaters created a special type of chaos on Hampton Boulevard.
Just driving through and saw that one car had been flooded out, so we stopped to help them, and we've been helping people, stopping them from going through the water ever since.
For a couple of hours, with no police in sight, Hunter Knopfsinger directed traffic, doing the best to keep drivers from attempting to ford the floodwaters.
Nobody's out here in our community helping at all, so it's up to our community. We got to help each other.
And sure enough, one driver went through, came out, then stalled. And eventually, Norfolk police finally showed up. They blocked off the street and relieved Hunter Knopfsinger of traffic duties.
You got to do what you got to do.
Not the worst flood Norfolk has seen, but just another chapter in life at sea level.
And that was a look back at Hurricane Dorian just 6 years ago in 2019. Now we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll wrap it up with a little bit of Hurricane Hub Live trivia. Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. We always like to wind up things here with a little bit of trivia. And we're going back to the Labor Day hurricane, which actually hit on September 2nd down in the Florida Keys. What year was a Labor Day hurricane? 1929, 1935, 1942, or 1949? Well, it was 1935 that the Labor Day hurricane hit the Florida Keys. It became a massive Category 5 hurricane, not unlike Dorian, which we just talked about. Of course, back in the 1930s, you didn't have nearly the advanced warning that we have today with the satellite era from the 50s that we can now see the storms as they're forming. So things have certainly changed quite a bit from the 1930s, and we can give more warning. Of course, a lot of those older hurricanes, like the one that hit Galveston in 1900, killed a lot more people because of the lack of warning. Well, that's it for this evening. I'm Meteorologist Evan Stewart. Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandages will be back in here tomorrow night. But make sure you join us here every night at 8 p.m. for Hurricane Hub Live.